Hello and welcome to another episode of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. My name is Jon Steinberg, your humble correspondent and host for this week. And we're going to do things a bit differently for your sixth episode with the, how to say it exactly, onslaught of California residents fleeing the state in large part to places like Idaho and Texas. We here at Living in the Sprawl decided to follow suit at least for the week. So we bring you a special edition of the show where we travel beyond our typical scope of influence to a land in the Southwest, a land in the South, the Southeast. Nope, it's just Texas. It doesn't fit into any of those. And that's where we are going for a special edition of Living in the Sprawl, Sprawl 2, Dallas. And we're going to expand the boundaries of our typical framework here to suggest the 10 best activities for you to do if you happen to find yourself in the northern region of the Lone Star State. Full confession, I used to live in Dallas, Texas. We went, and by we, my fiance and I, went to visit my sister, who still lives in Dallas. And we had a couple of days to adventure Southern California style. And that's what we're going to share here with you today. So, at number 10 for things to do in Dallas, Texas, I'm going to say start with a trip to Mia's. When I lived in Texas, I found myself on a quest in search of the best brisket tacos, best example of quote-unquote Tex-Mex in the city. And this was the first place that I tried and the last place that I tried before I moved back to California. Mia's has been around for a couple of decades. This, of course, being the longtime favorite spot of Hall of Fame Dallas Cowboys head football coach Tom Landry. This was also where Jerry Jones, who had recently purchased an ownership control of the Cowboys, sat down when he hired Jimmy Johnson. So this place carries a bit of historic weight for the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. So when we talk about Tex-Mex, for those of you unfamiliar with the cuisine, you might be wondering, where do we start? What exactly does this look like? Is it like El Torito? No, the answer is that it's not. So you are given a couple of tacos, brisket ones, at Mia's, and on the side, you have a little bowl full of gravy. This, I believe, representing the Tex aspect of the Tex-Mex partnership. And though it might seem a wee bit strange, this combination exists for a reason. Delectable, delicious, and something that I haven't been able to find on the level in Southern California. Mia's, where all of your North Texas traveling should begin. Number 10, check it out. For number 9, when you find yourself deep in the heart of Texas, by deep I mean north in this instance, and you're interested in some Italian food, a little bit of history, a little bit of true crime, and a wee bit of nostalgia, then head over to Campisi's Egyptian Lounge. And I know what you're thinking. You didn't say anything about Middle Eastern cuisine. No, I didn't. It's not a Middle Eastern restaurant. The business on its website, Campisi's Egyptian Lounge, says that they have been serving award-winning pizza to the residents of Dallas-Fort Worth since 1946. But they've been in the Mockingbird Lane location since 1950, where Campisi's came into a previously existing Egyptian lounge, and they didn't want to change the signage. So as a result, 70 some odd years later, Campisi's Egyptian Lounge is still what exists on Google Maps. Here, you will find the walls decorated in pictures which serve as an homage to figures from Dallas's past, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Mickey Mantle, and most notably, one Jack Ruby, who assassinated Lee Harvey Oswald 2 days after the murder of John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. Apparently, this was Ruby's favorite establishment, and he was known to frequent the eatery, often dining on veal parmesan, which is also, coincidentally or not, what I happened to order when I recently sat down for a meal at the famed restaurant for myself. This type of place, does every city have one of these? Because I don't necessarily think that that's the case. Yeah, they do exist in certain parts of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, etc., etc. You wouldn't necessarily think that this kind of a joint would exist in a city like Dallas, especially basically right outside of a campus like private school, Southern Methodist University. And yet, here it is, 70 years on, 7 decades of absolutely fascinating Dallas history. So if you want to ensconce yourself in the region, in some of its lore, and dine where not a presidential assassin dined, but the assassin of a presidential assassin dined, then I recommend at number 9 heading to Campisi's Egyptian Lounge. I think you'll enjoy it. Number 8, see the final works of Living in the Sprawl's favorite architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, in the form of the John Gillin home, located in kind of the Beverly Hills equivalent of Dallas, Preston Hollow, this being the area where Jerry Jones has a home, former President Bush Jr., and Dallas Mavericks owner and Shark Tank star Mark Cuban, the creme de la creme, if you will, of Dallas high society. This is kind of the area in which they reside. And I had assumed, upon gathering the address of the John Gillin residence, that this was just going to be in a gated community, and I'd have no recourse to see it except to view pictures on the internet. However, much to my amazement, it's not in a gated community, and though Living in the Sprawl will absolutely never condone parking outside of a private home, taking pictures, gawking, making a spectacle of the visit, you definitely should and can drive to the address and just get a brief glimpse of FLW's only residential building in Dallas, Texas. Really, really cool spot. Definitely different from a lot of his Los Angeles-based projects, but Frank Lloyd Wright, nevertheless. And another thing that we love highlighting on Living in the Sprawl are filming locations. And fortunately for us, the John Gillin home was also the site of one of my favorite Dallas-based modern movies. Wes Anderson, one of the signature American filmmakers of the past 30 years, set his debut, Bottle Rocket, primarily in North and Central Texas. He, having gone to the University of Texas and coincidentally having roomed with Owen Wilson, decided to make a caper kind of, Bonnie and Clyde-ish, but not really, because there's no crime romance in the film, but definitely a crime Texas caper set with his best friend in the northern Texas region. And they used the John Gillin home as a site in Bottle Rocket. It's actually where the villain happens to live in the film. So if you love Frank Lloyd Wright as much as the team here at Living in the Sprawl, then we highly recommend, at number 8, checking out the John Gillin residence in Preston Hollow, Dallas's Beverly Hills. I think you'll have a terrific time. At number 7, take a day trip to Waco. In the aftermath of the 1993 siege at the Branch Davidian compound, who would have thought that Waco would have been any type of a destination for anything other than morbid tourism? Well, Chip and Joanna Gaines of HGTV's Magnolia fame and Baylor University changed that. So if you drive roughly 2 hours south of Dallas, you'll find yourself in Waco, Texas, and maybe 9 miles or so outside of the city proper, you can actually drive to the former location of the Branch Davidian compound, where 82 men, women, and children lost their lives in April of 1993. This was my second time at this particular spot, but I have to be honest, I feel as though I learned a great deal more in my return visit. I hadn't noticed on my first trip the presence of little signs on different parts of the former property. One which indicates where a school bus had been located, and another that points out where women and children lost their lives. There's actually a kind of chapel building on the premises, which serves as sort of an off-kilter museum dedicated to the series of events that led to that compound being incinerated in 1993 that I thought was thoroughly fascinating. And it's rare that you see the site of such an infamous incident like this, and you can really wrap your head around the entire thing. And that's just one aspect of visiting Waco. Additionally, that aforementioned Chip and Joanna Gaines impromptu urban village kind of situation, the Fixer-Upper property, is really something to behold. A ton of shops and places to get a bite to eat. It all goes to the couple's credo of being able to fix formerly cast aside locations up and turn them into tourist destinations. This being one of the primary sites for people outside of the state of Texas to see when they find themselves in the region. Waco is basically in between Dallas and Austin. And though Dallas is the cosmopolitan metropolis and Austin is the kind of strange capital of the state that really bears little resemblance to anywhere else outside of maybe Marfa in the state, Waco is definitely on the ascent. The Baylor Bears won their first men's collegiate basketball championship, and the women have a hell of a squad of their own. The sports programs, period, have significantly raised the profile of Baylor University, and it's a beautiful campus. Definitely something to see while you are there. And any visit to Waco absolutely must with a capital M, include a visit to the Dr. Pepper Museum. Dr. Pepper, for those of you who do not reside in Texas, is a soft drink. And we don't see many commercials for it on television. If you live in a place like California, I wouldn't blame you if you forgot about its existence and went, oh, wait, people still drink that? The fact is, yeah, they do. In Texas, in large quantities. So the beverage was actually created and developed in Waco, Texas, and there is a nifty museum dedicated to all things Dr. Pepper. Me personally, I love a bit of kitsch, a bit of history, tradition, to go along with genuine Americana. And all of that is on full panoramic display at the Dr. Pepper Museum. So if you are interested in a trip to the past, go to the Dr. Pepper Museum. They'll at least give you a free small beverage while you're there. You can even make it a float if you so desire. Waco, Texas. Underrated. For number 6, head to the artistic part of Dallas, the weird part of Dallas, the strange but consistently alluring Deep Ellum. It is here that you will find arguably the best barbecue in the Metroplex, and you can find that at Pecan Lodge. So this is the type of barbecue, you can't get it in Los Angeles for sure. In many parts of California, you can't get it because of the laws that curtail the use of big-time smokers, which definitely help in the preparation of brisket in Texas and other parts of the country. You just don't have access to that in a lot of California. And at Pecan Lodge, the brisket, now, it's not in the form of tacos a la Mia's, but the brisket and the ribs, the sausage, this is the reason that the Food Network was created. This is where sustenance meets success, where happiness reigns in culinary form. If this meal doesn't make you smile, then you are probably a grim-faced person, because this type of food should make any carnivore absolutely delighted. And after any meal at the Pecan Lodge, and you might want to get there during off hours, because this is the type of place that has like a 2-hour wait at primetime dining hours. So after this, I would recommend going to a little, it's not quite a hole in the wall bar, but it's definitely a dive. It was my favorite when I lived in the region, Lee Harvey's. And the name is like half the fun, not half the fun, like a third of the fun. Take into account that the official record states that Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And then remember how scarred and marred the city of Dallas was for decades after the assassination. People didn't want to go there. Not until Jerry Jones bought the Cowboys and Larry Hagman and company, JR, on television's primetime Dallas, made the location safe to visit again. And yet, there's literally a bar whose name stands in tribute, to assassin of President Kennedy. And this bar, Lee Harvey's, is in Deep Ellum. It's not politically correct, and yet it's wonderful. And you can get the type of down-home, only in North Texas will you find this premium beer that I think you're looking for. So if you want to get a little bit weird, take a stroll with someone you like quite a bit around Deep Ellum. After Pecan Lodge, go to Lee Harvey's and order a deeply politically incorrect Shiner Bock. For number 5, we suggest visiting the Stockyards in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, Fort Worth is to Dallas what Orange County is to Los Angeles in terms of driving distance and reputation, cultural significance. It's pretty on par comparison, actually. And this is the thing to see in Fort Worth while you're there. So it had been a few years since I'd made the trip, and on my most recent visit to the Stockyards, it felt a lot like the Las Vegas Strip in that on a Saturday at roughly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, hundreds and hundreds of individuals were walking the streets of Fort Worth with open alcohol containers, a la what you would see outside the Bellagio and Mandarin on Las Vegas Boulevard. I didn't know this was legal. I didn't know this type of thing happened anywhere in the country outside of Las Vegas, but evidently it does. People were in a deliriously joyful mood as well, going from business to business, trying on makeshift chaps, and sampling some saltwater taffy. Just a joyous ode to days gone by. For, of course, it was in this general region where cowboys who were headed on the Chisholm Trail from Texas to Kansas herding cattle would stop and let their hair down. This is a polite way of saying that this used to be a red light district, and prostitution, although it was called sporting euphemistically at the time. That all went down within, I don't know, a mile and a half of kind of where the Stockyards are today. And it's fun thinking about drunken, maybe sexually frustrated cowboys with a significant quantity of alcohol flowing through their veins, just getting up to stuff on the streets there in Fort Worth. And an interesting juxtaposition with what I just witnessed in 2021 and the large mass of individuals walking the premises carrying open alcohol containers. How far have we really come? Well, much to any visitor's benefit, not that far. And that's what makes Fort Worth so damned charming. At about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you will see modern day cowboys bringing in a herd of cattle through the streets, much like they did around the turn of the century and the couple of decades leading up to that. If you're in metropolitan Dallas, you can easily forget that you're in the state of Texas. You will see cowboy hats, you will hear accents. It is Texas, after all. However, for those uninitiated in the ways of the Lone Star State, whose primary source of information on the state will be pop culture and things that you may have seen, television shows, etc., you're probably thinking more of a place like Fort Worth. Which leads me to Lonesome Dove Western Bistro, Tim Love's flagship steakhouse and home of culinary artistry. Easily one of the more interesting restaurants that I've been to in this part of the country. On the menu, you'll be able to find steaks of all sizes and cuts, and those are fantastic. But I was kind of blown away when I had the opportunity to order kangaroo nachos. Kangaroo is not a kind of catch-all term for a different type of meat that you'd get from parts, etc. It's literally a kangaroo. You're having kangaroo nachos. No euphemism. They're very, very unusual and kind of delightful. Highlights also include elk foie gras sliders, which I'd never seen before in any venue, in any city, in any state, in any part of this American land of ours. I went back and rewatched Tim Love's episode from season 9, Bravo's Top Chef, and that's a good place to start if you are unfamiliar with some of his work. But this is an unpretentious steakhouse that epitomizes the neighborhood. A great place to experiment while traveling through the heart of the Lone Star State. So grab a beer, put on your chaps, and legally stroll the streets of Fort Worth at the Stockyards. For number 4, we highly recommend, be it a game, an event, or even if it's just a tour, checking out Jerry World. That's right, At&T Stadium, otherwise known as Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, Texas. When I first had the chance to visit this now iconic venue in Arlington, my jaw hit the floor when I saw the television screen, or the Jumbotron screen inside. And then I learned that at the time it was the largest television screen in the world. And it's really something to behold. It's kind of hard to describe unless you've actually seen it. It's a television screen that plunges from the scoreboard perilously close to the field. If you're sitting in the nosebleed section of At&T Stadium, it might look like the NFL players on the field are in danger of being hit by a falling Jumbotron. The screen is that massive and appears to be that close to the action when you're sitting a little bit far away from it. I feel like if you had the ability to come up with a customized 21st century sporting/entertainment venue and you were designing it from square one, you might arrive at something alarmingly close to to this venue. I've seen everything here from political-ish rally. This is in 2012, so long divorced from current American politics, as well as a soccer game between Barcelona and an MLS club, a game between Texas Christian and BYU, just a real world-class, probably once-in-a-generation style venue to see an event or take a tour. In either case, it is worth a trip, and now with the recently opened ballpark for the Texas Rangers across the street, makes it even more of a reason for kind of a side trip out to Arlington. When you think about contemporary Dallas, it's near impossible to distance yourself entirely from the Cowboys. As mentioned previously in this episode, the assassination of JFK really had an enormous effect on the way in which the city was perceived by people living outside of it, as well as people living inside of it. And it was the success of the TV show Dallas, combined with, I think, what Jerry Jones did for the Dallas Cowboys and bringing it back to be America's team, that really changed the way in which the city was viewed by a large portion of people. So there's really nothing like it. If you can, get to a game at At&T Stadium, a.k.a. Jerry World. Number 3, get yourself to the Texas Theater in Oak Cliff. Most famously, the Texas Theater, which has been around since 1931, was the site of Lee Harvey Oswald's arrest in the wake of the JFK assassination. Many people speculate as to, was the Texas Theater a rendezvous point where Oswald was supposed to meet up with his handlers, the people who had truly ordered the assassination of the president, or was it merely a convenient location to help him get off the street into a seemingly private, impenetrable location after he had just assassinated a police officer? In any event, the Texas Theater, for this and a host of other reasons, holds an outsized place in the lexicon of Dallas American history. On a recent visit, I had the opportunity to see Academy Award nominated film Another Round, which the movie was okay, but the experience of sitting in that hallowed theater where the previews, in quotes, ranged in spectrum from what must be a 50-year-old interview with Orson Welles to probably less than a year old ad featuring Jay and Silent Bob informing patrons to avoid vaping within the walls of the Texas Theater, really spanned time, place, and generation. This place felt timeless, to be completely transparent and honest with you, my lovely audience. From the picture with Quentin Tarantino in the hallway to the old-timey cocktails being served in the lounge when you first walk in, the magnificent and imposing marquee out front, which when it's lit up is really something. The Texas Theater is an incredible piece of Americana. I kind of can't believe that they still show movies there. And it's a bit different than going to the El Capitan or the Arrow in Santa Monica, the Egyptian even, because those venues are all sort of part of the Los Angeles entertainment industry apparatus. You know what you're getting into in Los Angeles. Yeah, the film industry in large part was born and raised in the City of Angels, so you would expect for there to be historic movie theaters that used to premiere films starring Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, that sort of deal. But you wouldn't expect to find a place just as cool in Dallas, Texas, with a connection to a pivotal moment in American history, like you will in Oak Cliff, South Dallas, with the Texas Theater showing all manner of programs, and definitely worth your time. For number 2 on Living in the Sprawl's list of best things to do in Dallas, Texas, we recommend Billy Bob's in Fort Worth, the world's largest honky-tonk. Now, when my fiance asked me what a honky-tonk was, I thought about it. It came up with, well, it's kind of like a bar melded into an amphitheater with areas for mechanical bull riding in the form of a gigantic Southern-style carnival. Could have done better, I suppose. But in any event, this is a remarkable place. If you want to be like John Travolta impressing Deborah Winger, an urban cowboy, there's the aforementioned mechanical bull. Or if you want to be a little bit like your humble correspondent, you could go to Billy Bob's for a 1990s-esque concert featuring the Gin Blossoms, Lit, and Marcy Playground. Billy Bob's, in short, it's kind of all things to all people. If you want it to be a dive bar, yeah, check. If you prefer kind of the games at an amusement park, check. If you are interested in live music that doesn't sound like you are on the Santa Monica Pier, check. There's a lot going on here, and it is adjacent to the Stockyards, so you could cap off a wonderful day with Lonesome Dove, as I talked about earlier, and the former red light district turned modern day companion area to the Las Vegas Strip, Stockyards, with a voyage to the world's largest honky-tonk that is at Billy Bob's. The place has been around since 1981, founded by a former Texas A&M Aggie college football player. There are a couple of places like I thought Urban Cowboy surely had been filmed at Billy Bob's. Turns out that it was Houston. And yet here in Fort Worth, you will see all degrees of humanity at Billy Bob's if you make the trip and check it out. It's really a spectacular place. So, number 2, go to Billy Bob's. And number 1 on our list of best things to do in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, this is kind of a no-brainer, but I will say it aloud anyway. Go to the 6th floor museum, Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. There is literally an X. There are actually multiple X's on the street across from the infamous grassy knoll where President Kennedy was hit by an assassin's bullet. There have been hundreds upon thousands, tens of thousands of theories and possible explanations for what happened on November 22nd, 1963. But what we do know is that there was an assassination. It happened in Dealey Plaza, and the 6th floor museum tells us the history of that event. That's probably the most famous thing that has ever happened in the city of Dallas. And from a true crime perspective, it's the Holy Grail, I think, in America, for sure. And this is a podcast that is interested in food, in history, in sports, and absolutely in true crime. So one of the most interesting things about the 6th floor museum is that you actually see the window where the assassin's bullet evidently sprang from. And though that specific area is kind of cordoned off, if you go up one floor to other exhibitions that are part of the museum, you can get that kind of same exact angle and judge for yourself whether 3 bullets in, I think, under 7 seconds, if all of that checks out with you. But for reliving painful yet important part of American history, this is a singular experience. We don't have anything in Southern California, or California really period, that I can think of that holds this kind of weight from any number of different vantage points. So if you start with kind of a walk from Houston to Ellum streets, and then a trip on foot to the grassy knoll where the Zapruder film was shot, you can really get a terrific sense of all the possible angles. Were there shooters over by the train tracks? Were they smoking cigarettes behind the grassy knoll where witnesses say they smelt gunpowder immediately following the assassination? You can really get a great perspective on what it might have looked like on November 22nd, 1963, and what you believe was possible and might have happened. But wherever you stand on the issue, this is a site that you've got to see with your own eyes. So, number one, Dealey Plaza and the 6th Floor Museum to judge for yourself what actually happened in Dallas the day that JFK was murdered by an assassin's bullet. And for this week, I'm going to throw out a couple of movie recommendations, things that you might want to watch before any trip to North Texas. I would say Bottle Rocket, like we talked about earlier, where the John Gillin home is seen, Wes Anderson's first film. That would be good. The movie Killer Joe with a pretty menacing, nihilistic Matthew McConaughey right before the reconnaissance began. That adaptation of a Tracy Letts play directed by William Friedkin is something else. And then I just caught up with Bonnie and Clyde for the first time in roughly 10 years. And I didn't even remember that happening to be a Dallas-related story. But it is. That is where the star-crossed lovers happen to meet, where they both grew up. And that is one of the best films of the 1960s, for sure. I mean, Dallas Buyers Club, you've got 2 Academy Award-winning performances there. And then, of course, Oliver Stone's JFK, which is, again, wherever you happen to stand on the issue, a really magnificent piece of filmmaking. And then one personal entry would be Talk Radio, another Oliver Stone entry starring Eric Bogosian about a shock jock operating in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. A great movie that falls by the wayside a bit in discussions of contemporary film. So there you have it. Our special episode, our Sprawl 2, our sojourn to the lands where people seem to be moving. It was funny. I told my psychiatrist, therapist, however you want to say it, about this podcast, and he started laughing, saying, wow, with all the people that are moving out of California, it seems like everyone's just moving out of California. I said, that's an interesting point, and I think that's why this podcast is great for this time and place in America. And though we call Southern California our home, we do understand the appeal of North Texas, of Dallas, and it is definitely where we would have our Amazon second headquarters located if the option were available to us. Okay, thank you so much. Again, want to remind you to get in touch with us at livinginthesprawlpodcast@gmail.com. Please write there with any suggestions, comments, queries, anything like that. We would love to correspond, interact with any and all of you, and find us on our Instagram page, which is Living in the Sprawl Podcast. That's our handle. Until next time, I am your humble correspondent, Jon Steinberg, speaking on behalf of my lovely and talented fiance/producer, Lisa Lowe. Thanks again, and until next time.